Mike Brown, the former FEMA director.
Joining us here is the former FEMA director.
History, I think, was very unkind to you, my friend. Very unkind.
Mr. Brown, thanks for being with us.
This is Michael Brown Unplugged.
Welcome to this episode of Michael Brown Unplugged. Let's get started because there's a lot to talk about on this Monday morning. Let's talk about climate change for a minute. You know, when all these American climate scientists who've claimed that they've witnessed all the effects of global warming, they must actually be referring to a time beyond more than 14 or 15 years ago. And the reason I say that is because there has been no warming in the United States since at least 2005. Now, how do I make that claim? It's according to updated data from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Now, back in January of 2005, NOAA began recording temperatures at this newly built U.S. Climate Reference Network. It includes 114 pristinely maintained temperature stations that are spaced relatively uniformly across the United States. And NOAA selected the locations that were far away from urban and land development impacts because, those might artificially taint temperature readings. Those of us that live in urban areas know that oftentimes it's a lot hotter in the urban corridors than it is out for example, in Colorado, out on the eastern plains, and certainly up in the mountains. But prior to this U.S. Climate Reference Network going online, the alarmists and the skeptics were battling over the accuracy of the temperature data. Now, with most of the pre-existing temperature stations located in or near urban settings, obviously those are subject to false temperature signals, and those create their own microclimates that change over time. Government officials performed many, what can only be described as controversial adjustments to the raw temperature data. They made adjustments to the raw data. So if the raw data said, 25 degrees Celsius, 30 degrees Celsius, or, 110 degrees Fahrenheit, whatever it was, scientists would make their own adjustments to what the actual data read. Now, skeptics of this asserted climate crisis obviously pointed out that most of the reported warming in the United States was non-existent when you go back and you look at the raw temperature data, but that warming was added to the record by government officials. Well, going back to the U.S. Climate Reference Network, it has now eliminated the need to rely on and adjust the data from outdated temperature stations. Now, I'm looking at a graph right now that's reported in a bunch of the different climate online blogs and websites. If you look at the graph, the temperature stations show no warming since 2005 when the network went online. If anything, U.S. temperatures right now are slightly cooler than they were 14 years ago. Now, the climate activists frequently maybe is a better word, either visit or mention particular regions, states, or places in the United States and claim that the warming impacts are just self-evident, that they're accelerating and that they're unmistakable. But how can that be? How can they make that claim when you go back and you look at the raw data that has now been released and confirmed by NOAA, that there has been zero warming in the United States since at least 2005. And I emphasize since at least 2005. So 14 years ago, 15 years ago. Now, unfortunately, when all the politicians and the activists claim that they can see the impacts of climate change in a particular place, the media never questions them about it. They just accept the claims at face value. But the objective temperature data shows no recent warming has occurred. Now, there's also a good reason to believe that U.S. temperatures have not warmed at all since the 1930s. Now, why do I make that claim? Raw temperature readings, according to this one article, says raw temperature readings at the pre-existing stations indicate temperatures are the same now as 80 years ago. All of the asserted U.S. warming since 1930 is, I want to emphasize this sentence, All of the asserted U.S. warming since the 1930s is the product of the controversial adjustments made to the raw data. When you think about, the whole idea about, statistics lie. Well, regardless of the basis for which a scientist might go back and adjust raw data, if you look at just the raw data, you see that at least since the 1930s, there has been no warming whatsoever. Now, skeptics will point out that as the American population has grown, so has the artificial warming signal that's generated as cities get larger and more widespread. Why? Well, obviously because you've got more asphalt, you've got more cars, you've got more machinery, you've got more people, you have more concrete. All of those things absorb the thermal rays from the sun and then reflect that heat back into the atmosphere. If anything, the raw temperature readings should be adjusted downward relative to past temperatures, or past temperatures ought to be adjusted upward in comparison to present temperatures rather than the other way around. If raw temperature readings are the same today as they were 80 years ago, when there were actually fewer artificial factors that spuriously raising temperature readings, then U.S. temperatures today may actually be cooler than they were in the early 20th century. And of course, this gets back to the point that I've always made about exactly where do we insert the thermometer. Now we've got the thermal readings where we just swipe the thermometer across babies' foreheads or our adult foreheads. But, it used to be you want to get a really accurate reading, you need a rectal reading. Well, where do we cram the thermometer into the Earth's butt to get the most accurate reading? Well, I would say we've got it right now. And we have it right now because NOAA itself has gone back, taken out all of the artificial adjustments. And when you take out all of the artificial adjustments and you just look at the raw data, whether you go back to 2005 or you go back to 1930, no warming. And in fact, some would argue, particularly on the graph that I'm looking at, that there's actually been a slight cooling over the past 15 years. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. I didn't see Brit Hume on Fox News Sunday or whatever program it was that he was on. But on Sunday, Brit Hume tweeted out that, Biden has always made gaffes by the bushel. But some of his recent ones suggest the kind of memory loss associated with senility. Example, this one, which you will hear in just a second, plus remembering that he was not the vice president when meeting Parkland students, twice confusing Theresa May with Margaret Thatcher, and then this one. He is in Keene, New Hampshire. Keene, New Hampshire. See if you catch the gaffe.
Of Keene.
I'm back. I've been here a number of times. Last time was, I think, all the way back in 2014. But I've been here before that. I love this place. Look, what's not to like about Vermont in terms of the beauty of it? And what a neat town. This is sort of a scenic, beautiful town. The mayor's been a good guy, and everybody's been really friendly. I like Keene a lot.
But he said, what's not to like about Vermont in terms of the beauty. Now, I know New Hampshire and Vermont are right next to each other, and maybe sometimes you're not sure whether you've crossed the line. Hey, did I cross the state line? Did I not cross the state line? But when he talks about how much he loves, in particular, Keene, New Hampshire, but then refers to how much he loves Vermont, which is an adjoining state, not where Keene is, I think Brit Hume actually has a legitimate point. And this is sad because all of us who have elderly parents know that they, hell's bells, Tamara accuses me of forgetting stuff all the time. But as people start to get older, they do become a little more forgetful, a little more confused. And when you think about the rigors of the campaign trail, some people are more suited to it. Some people are more readily adaptable to it. And some people can really go with the flow. They're on top of things. They know where they are. They don't tire easily. They've got more energy than, you think about this current crop, or you think about how Trump conducts himself at rallies. They've got more energy than most people have in their 50s or 60s. And then you hear Biden not really sure where he is, confusing Margaret Thatcher with Prime Minister Theresa May, not sure about, claiming that he visited the Parkland students after the shooting when he was the vice president. I think Brit Hume actually has a good point. It's a sad point, but a good point. I don't know in particular how well Biden, he may do fine in the debates, because in the debates you're there, it is a lot of pressure, but you don't have the rigors of traveling all the time. So I'm going to be watching to see how he does in the debates. But I think it's telling that when he's on the campaign trail itself, he really is getting very, very forgetful. And I think that's sad. I don't say this because I get any glee out of it. I think it's sad and pathetic to watch it. Hang on, I'll be right back. I want to do a little CNN bashing. I know it's way too easy, but I think this one is simply amazing. They had on a Duke psychiatrist. Now, if you know anything about Duke University is an incredibly good institution of higher learning. But like all institutions of higher learning, you've really got the moonbats. And I think in this case, Alan Francis, who is a medical doctor, a psychiatrist, is on the CNN, and he tells Brian Stetler that Trump, listen for yourself.
Diagnose.
Right, without saying, I'm diagnosing, because you've never met the man.
Exactly.
You can describe what you're seeing. So, Dr. Francis, I know you disagree with this view that Dr. Lee and a couple other dozen psychiatrists have published in this book. You say it's dangerous to be talking this way. Why?
Well, I think that medicalizing politics has three very dire consequences. The first is that it stigmatizes the mentally ill. I've known thousands of patients. Almost all of them have been well-behaved, well-mannered, good people. Trump is none of these. Lumping the mentally ill with Trump is a terrible insult to the mentally ill, and they have enough problems and stigma as it is. The second issue is that calling Trump crazy hides the fact that we're crazy for having elected him, and even crazier for allowing his crazy policies to persist. Trump is as destructive a person in this century as Hitler, Stalin, and Mao were in the last century. He may be responsible for many more million deaths than they were. He needs to be contained, but he needs to be contained by attacking his policies, not his person. It's crazy for us to be destroying the climate our children will live in. It's crazy to be giving tax cuts to the rich that will add trillions of dollars to the debt our children will have to pay. It's crazy to be destroying our democracy by claiming that the press and the courts are the enemy of the people. We have to face these policies, not Trump's person. Now, it's absolutely impossible. You can bet the House that the Congress, that Pence, that the cabinet will never, ever remove Trump on grounds of mental unfitness.
And do you think that CNN will ever stop and say, wait, hang on. Have you ever thought about this? That the people who are questioning Trump's sanity are the ones that are truly bonkers? This guy is a medical doctor. He is a psychiatrist. He's claiming that Trump may be responsible for many more million deaths than Hitler, Stalin, and Mao. And yet it just goes unchallenged. It absolutely goes unchallenged. Who's crazy here? Who is absolutely crazy? I think it's the former chairman of the psychiatry department at Duke University. Duke, you better rein him in. Last week I talked a little bit about the whole idea of whether or not the United States should buy Greenland. And I talked about the Danish monarchy and this absolute monarchy. And I failed to mention that Trump had tweeted out back on August 19 an absolutely hilarious tweet. The tweet said, "I promise not to do this to Greenland." And it was a Photoshop picture of Nuke with a Trump tower, like the Trump Tower in Vegas, superimposed on the town. "I promise not to do this to Greenland." It was very clever. It was funny. But let's talk about it for a second, because Obama let Russia and China make all kinds of moves in the Arctic. The fact that Trump even broached the idea of buying Greenland shows that he really does understand the strategic importance of defending our interests, not only in the Arctic, but elsewhere. Well, they've taken it one step further. They're now planning to open a U.S. consulate in Greenland for the first time in decades amid increased strategic and economic interest in the Danish territory. The State Department sent a letter to Congress noting that they were going to reestablish a consulate in Nuuk as part of a broader plan to increase U.S. presence in the Arctic. The Associated Press got a copy of the letter, and they've distributed, it's on the wire services now. But in the letter, they note that the United States has a strategic interest in enhancing the political, economic, and commercial relationships across the entire Arctic region in the letter that they sent to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. They're exactly right. And I think that, along with what, I watched the Sunday news shows yesterday, and they had Larry Kudlow on, the president's economic advisor. And those of you that know Larry Kudlow know he's pretty outspoken, and he's a very, animate speaker. And he was on Face the Nation, and they were really trying to grill him about the effects that the tariffs would have on working class people in this country. Now, I'm opposed to tariffs, and I think tariffs are wrong, and I do support free trade. But I think what Trump is trying to do here, and some people would argue that I'm trying to rationalize it, but I think what Trump is trying to do is he's trying to draw a line in the sand and say, rightfully so, that for the past 30 years, the Chinese government has drained trillions of dollars out of the U.S. economy. They've done it by stealing intellectual property. They have done it by requiring that anybody that wants to do manufacturing or other business in China must have a Chinese partner. That would be like saying to China, if you want to do any business in the United States, you must have a U.S. partner. You must attach yourself to a truly U.S.-based corporation, and then have that U.S.-based corporation steal all the Chinese IP, all of their intellectual property. Well, Trump is just saying, look, presidents have been saying for decades that they want to stand up to China, but nobody's done it. So these tariffs, in the short term, are at least signaling to China that era of just, basically economic appeasement is over, absolutely over. Now, I don't think that Trump will allow us to get into a full-blown trade war with China. But even if we were to get into a trade war with China, I believe, based on everything that I've read, that China has more to lose than we do. And quite frankly, if we end up in a trade war, and it does start to affect working class Americans, everybody who goes to shop at Walmart, they get their groceries or their whatever they buy at Walmart, and those prices start to inch upward, then all of those Republicans and Democrats, and in particular the Democrats, who have been also screaming for decades that we need to stand up to China, you know what you can do to offset those increased prices? That's right, strategic tax cuts. Now, I don't know whether that means a payroll tax cut, another income tax cut. Well, I don't know what it means, but I don't think we'll get that far. I think the very fact that Trump is standing up to the Chinese because they have more to lose than we do is him just drawing the line in the sand. It's him calling their bluff. Stay tuned. We'll see what happens. But in the meantime, he's at least taking a stance in Greenland, opening a consulate, getting some American personnel there besides the former air base, whatever. I think that's a good move. Since I'm doing a podcast and I'm not constrained, this is Michael Brown Unplugged. Since I'm not constrained by radio where it's really unseemly and frowned upon by program directors and others, to play a soundbite that goes on for more than, say, 2 minutes. Nonetheless, I want to go back to 2007. In 2007, there was a program called ABC 2020. Now, some would argue that 2020 was about hindsight. Others would argue that ABC 2020 was about foresight. But whether it's hindsight or foresight, this video has aged well for those of us who understand that the issue of gun control is not an issue about hunting. It's not an issue about crazy people. It is an issue about a constitutional right to keep and bear arms in order to protect yourself against a tyrannical government. That's the Second Amendment. We also know that the law of self-defense gives us this natural right to defend ourselves. And one of the ways that we can defend ourselves is through the use of firearms. So this clip goes on for about 4 minutes. But because it is a fantastic example of how the media can so easily change from one position to another position. And it's also an example of how the media, at least back in 2007, to some degree, you got to remember this is ABC. ABC News, the network, is talking about gun control. If you don't think that the media now tries to mold public opinion by doing only opinion within the news and not doing hard news, I want you to listen to this. And it may also be why John Stossel is no longer with ABC News.
Hello, I'm Don Daler, and this is 2020 in Touch. On Friday, we had a new entry in our series, Myths, Lies, and Downright Stupidity. Of the 10 myths we covered, and you won't be surprised at this one, the most talked about was gun control reduces crime. Here's John Stossel.
It's about the weapons, the guns. Where did the killer get them?
They're shocked at how easy it is to purchase a gun.
It is simply too easy to obtain a firearm.
The belief that gun control prevents gun crime is why many were upset this spring when
a bombshell court ruling could put handguns back in D.C. homes.
A court threw out Washington, D.C.'s 30-year ban on guns. And that's outrageous, said public officials.
More guns, very simply, lead to more violence.
I don't know how anyone can be serious in saying that, because the gun violence went up when they banned handguns.
Tom Palmer's one of the plaintiffs who sued D.C. over the right to have a gun. He's correct about gun violence going up. Since Washington's gun law passed, the murder rate actually increased, even while America's murder rate dropped. It's because guns can also save lives, says Palmer, as one saved his years ago in California.
We were walking on the street, and this group of young men took really strong exception to that. They stood up, 19 or 20 young guys, followed us, and they told us, we're going to kill you, they'll never find the bodies. And I turned around and showed them the business end of a pistol.
Just pulling out the gun was enough to stop them.
Yeah, it works. Merely having a weapon and being able to display it when I was threatened saved my life.
Now, you may think that carrying a gun, as Palmer did, is illegal in most of America, but it's not.
Many people don't realize that today in America, in about 40 states, it is legal to carry a concealed weapon on your person.
And in those 40 states, there is no more violent crime or murder than in states where guns are restricted. The town of Kennesaw, Georgia, went a step further and passed a law requiring every household to have a gun. Did they then experience a crime wave? No.
Well, after the city ordinance passed, there was actually a decrease in reported crime in the Kennesaw area, especially violent crime.
Now, I don't want politicians ordering me to have a gun, and the law isn't enforced here. But townspeople we talk to like the law.
I think it makes people think twice.
This is a very peaceful place to be. We should have guns. I mean, that's what free society do.
These maximum security felons said they fear an armed victim much more than the police.
When you go to rob somebody you don't know, it makes it harder.
And they said gun laws don't matter to them. They don't obey them.
I'm not worried about the government saying that I can't carry a gun. I'm going to carry a gun anyway.
It's impossible to know exactly how often guns stop criminals because who reports a crime that doesn't happen? But people use guns in self-defense every day.
Often just showing a gun is enough to prevent the crime.
When robbers broke into Joyce and Raymond Papin's home and attacked Raymond, he yelled,
"Get the gun, get the gun."
Joyce did, and when the robbers saw it, they ran away.
Boy, when he saw the gun, he just started running, and they weren't just walking fast, they were running. They had boots on, you could hear them boots a-clopping.
Joyce says having a gun changes the balance of power. And here's a controversial idea. Some Virginia Tech students say they wish students had been allowed to carry guns, because one of them might have stopped the killer before he shot so many people. And that's what happened 5 years ago at the Appalachian School of Law. Hearing shots, 2 students went to their cars, got their guns, and helped restrain this shooter until police arrested him.
One of the things that the gun does is it equalizes unequals. My mom told me when I was a young boy, because she was armed, she was never afraid.
So, gun control isn't necessarily crime control. In fact, the National Academy of Sciences reviewed hundreds of studies and could not document a single gun regulation that reduced violent crime or murder.
If someone gets into your house, which would you rather have, a handgun or a telephone? You can call the police if you want, and they'll get there, and they'll take a picture of your dead body. But they can't get there in time to save your life. The first line of defense is you.
Can you imagine that story airing on network television today? Of course not. But let's talk for a moment about something that was in that story that caught my attention that you may not be aware of. Remember when a couple of people talked about just showing the gun or just pointing the gun saved their lives, caused the dirtbags to turn and run? In many states, there is a law against brandishing. Brandishing is showing your weapon, pointing your weapon in a menacing manner. Well, there's a new case that I want you to hear about. The Michigan Court of Appeals has reversed multiple felony convictions last week for a Detroit activist and a mother who gave birth while she was incarcerated last year. I don't know how you pronounce her name, but it's something like Sawada Salama Raw. She's 26 years old. She was convicted on felonious assault and felony firearm charges back in 2018 after she did this. She waved an unloaded, registered gun to fend off an attack on herself and her family. Now, she pleaded self-defense, but she was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Now, she was released back on bond in November of 2018, and then the Court of Appeals in Michigan took up her case. Her case drew national attention and outrage over the conviction of a black woman with no prior offenses who claimed self-defense in a stand-your-ground state. Now, I want you to know about her. She's an environmental and racial justice advocate, which should belie stereotypes, right? Because she is also a registered gun owner with a concealed carry permit. And she says that she used her gun to ward off a woman who was trying to hit her and her mother with a car. Now, she was incarcerated in her 3rd trimester of pregnancy. She gave birth to her 2nd child last spring. Now, her lawyers obviously tried to get her released on bond until her son's birth, but the Wayne County Circuit Court kept her incarcerated through her high-risk pregnancy. Now, her new conviction reversals rested on self-defense claims. Her lawyer, Birmingham-based Wade Fink, argued that her trial process involved a parade of errors and that the jury had not been properly informed about her self-defense claim. Now, the court that originally tried her told the jurors about self-defense with deadly force, but did not instruct the jury about self-defense and non-deadly force. In other words, pulling your gun out. In this case, it was unloaded. Pulling her gun out, pointing or waving the gun, in other words, brandishing the gun in self-defense. She wasn't trying to do anything except stop an attack by another woman trying to attack them in their car. So last Tuesday, as it reversed her convictions, the Michigan Court of Appeals said that the trial court's failure to give the jury instruction regarding the use of non-deadly force in self-defense was clearly erroneous. And the court decided that, listen, quote, it is more probable than not that the lack of proper instruction affected the outcome of the case. Now, why do you think they wouldn't want a case decided on an issue of self-defense in a stand-your-ground state where she brandished a gun, unloaded, trying to ward off an attack, because they don't want that kind of case law to get developed. Well, it's been developed in Michigan. Now the case rests with the prosecutors, who can decide to appeal the decision to the Michigan Supreme Court. They could pursue another trial, or they could do the right thing and drop the case. I got to tell you, the anti-gunners in the country are watching this closely, because for the first time you have a Second Amendment case that says she waved an unloaded gun in self-defense. She used it in a nonviolent way, and the conviction's been reversed. This is a great case to watch. CNN, maybe this is the CNN bashing episode of the Michael Brown Unplugged podcast, I don't know. But you may or may not have heard that CNN has hired former FBI Director Andy McCabe as a CNN contributor. Now, the reason I bring it up is because listen to what CNN had to originally say about Andy McCabe when it was discovered that he had been fired for lying.
Now, for them to fire him, here's where I stand on that. If you're a probationary agent with 1 day out of Quantico and you lie, bye. If you're a deputy director 2 days from retirement and you're accused of lying by a nonpartisan IG appointed under President Obama, who by every stretch of our imagination does the right thing and is not infected with politics, sorry, bye. I mean, it's a sad thing that it had to happen, but deputy directors and probationary agents have to be held to the same damn standard.
I mean, I can't argue with that. I mean, prosecutors would be in the same boat. I mean, it's really difficult. You know, people get so upset about the idea that those at the top get treated differently than those at the very entry level. And so, you know, you got to be consistent. And I'm totally with James on this. I mean, candor is so important, especially when you have a position of public trust, such as an FBI agent or a federal prosecutor.
Isn't that fascinating? Here you have CNN talking about how Andy McCabe should be fired for lying, that the deputy director or even a probationary FBI agent has to be held to a higher standard. You know, I guess when they introduce their new hire, we'd like to introduce our new CNN contributor, former deputy director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Andy McCabe. Now, you may have heard in the past, we talked about how he was, forced to resign because of lying to the inspector general. But we want you to now ignore all of that, because being a liar is an asset to us here at CNN. You know, that might become kind of inconvenient if he actually ends up indicted, which I think he might. Hey, CNN, way to go, way to go. At a recent meeting of the Democrat National Committee, the speaker was Reverend William Barber. He talked about socialism is endorsed by both the Constitution and the Bible. Listen closely.
When we embrace moral language, we must ask, does our policy care for the least of these? Does it lift up those who are most marginalized and dejected in our society? Does it establish justice? That is the moral question. If someone calls it socialism, then we must compel them to acknowledge that the Bible must then promote socialism. Because Jesus offered free health care to everyone, and he never charged a leper a copay.
And the audience stands in applause.
It's time for us to say, if you want to have a moral debate, bring it on, baby. The Bible says that a nation will be judged by how it treats the poor and the sick and women and the immigrant. The Bible says that God makes it rain on the just and the unjust alike. If you want to call caring for folks socialism, then the Constitution is a socialist document, because it calls us to promote the general welfare and to establish justice.
Oh, drives me nuts. That is a deliberate misreading of biblical principles by the Democrat National Committee to promote socialism. Let's be clear. The Bible teaches charity with one's own time and money. Socialism teaches charity with other people's time and money. It is not the same thing. The Bible and the Constitution are, in fact, the opposite of supporting socialism. Shame on the Democrat National Committee. Those of you who have listened to me over the years know that I'm pretty much an absolutist when it comes to free speech, and I think people ought to be able to say whatever they want to say, and whatever the consequences are, well, then they get to live with the consequences. But here it is, 2019, and a city council candidate in Michigan shocked a public forum when she said that she wants to keep her community white as much as possible. Her name is Jean Cramer. She made the comment last Thursday in response to a question about diversity in Marysville. That's a city in St. Clair County. It's about 55 miles northeast of Detroit. The Times-Herald in Port Huron said that she's one of 5 candidates running for 3 council seats in November. Now, more than 90% of Maryville's 9,700 person population is indeed white. Now, she responded when the moderator asked candidates if Marysville should do more to attract foreign-born residents, who are boosting populations, obviously, in Michigan and in other states. She replied, "Keep Marysville a white community as much as possible. White. Seriously. In other words, no foreign-born, no foreign people. Seriously. In other words, no foreign-born, no foreign people because of what, in our past, we've experienced it's better to have. Simply American-born. Put it that way and no foreigners. No." Now, the mayor pro tem, Cathy Haman, her son-in-law is black, her grandchildren are biracial. She says that she was stunned by the comments. "I don't even know that I can talk yet. I'm so upset and shocked. My father was 100% Syrian. They owned the Linwood Bar. It was a grocery store at the time. So basically, what you said is that my father and his family had no business to be in this community." Now, I love it when a feces storm gets stirred up by people saying stupid things. After the forum, when she was asked to explain her comments, she mocked God by rendering judgment on Haman and her family and misrepresented the Christian faith with this spectacular line of bovine feces. Now remember, Cathy Haman is the mayor pro tem, whose son-in-law is black, her grandchildren are biracial, and she talked about how her father was 100% Syrian. So after the forum, when asked to explain, this woman said this: "What Cathy Haman doesn't know is that her family is in the wrong. A husband and a wife need to be the same." Remember, this is 2019. "A husband and wife need to be the same race. Same thing with kids. That's how it's been from the beginning of, how can I say, when God created the heaven and the earth. He created Adam and Eve at the same time. But as far as me being against blacks, no, I'm not." What? I'd say you're a dumbass. You're just stupid. Well, besides bigoted and just a dumbass. There's no better way to put it. Now, the mayor, Damon, I don't know how you pronounce it, used the words vile and jaw-dropping. Here's what he said: "Ms. Cramer's disturbing and disgusting ideology is flatly rejected by me, our entire city council, all of the city administration, and our employees. The candidate forum was to be a mechanism to learn about the candidates and their viewpoints, thus empowering our electorate to make an informed decision before voting. The only positive result from this clear expression of overt and unapologetic racism is that this candidate's views were put on display before our voters go to the polls in November." Now, all in all, I would think that the candidate forum was indeed a great success. It accomplished what it set out to do. Now Marysville's residents know precisely who Jean Cramer is, and they know precisely where she stands, and now they can vote accordingly. You see, I am for free speech. This is why, many people would say, "Oh my God, what she said is hate speech." We need to ban that. We need to shut that down. No, we don't. In fact, I say, if that's what someone really believes, I want to hear it. If any of my friends, co-workers, anybody that I hang around with felt that way, I'd want to know about it. Anyway, this dumb woman doubled down on her comments the next day. Asked if she understood why her comments might upset her neighbors. Here's what she said. If there is the biracial marriage in the family, yes, because those people don't know the other side of it. For whatever reason I've heard, they love each other, whatever, but there's also such a thing as remaining single. People don't necessarily have to get married, and if they love somebody, love them single. There's nothing wrong with that. Oh, so just to be a complete jerk here. So she thinks that biracial marriages are awful. So instead what you should do is just have, wild promiscuous sex out of wedlock. She told ABC affiliate WXYX-TV that, quote, I'm not a racist, that she would not have a problem with black people moving into Marysville as long as they were committed to keeping their properties looking nice. Yeah, I'm not a racist. Yeah, if black people want to move in, that's fine. But by golly, they better mow their yard. They better mow their yards. Now, about those foreigners. She then went on to say that she doesn't want foreigners who are pushy moving to Marysville. She said they should go back and fix the problems in their country instead of coming to America. As far as I know, as long as we've been here, Marysville has been a white community, a white city. If we have seen a black person here and there, well, that's good. Hey, honey, you know what? I was driving through town today. Yeah, I was driving down Main Street. Guess what? You'll never believe what I saw. Oh, tell me, honey, what did you see? I saw a black person. Holy cow. If we have seen a black person here and there, whatever, we're not bothered by it. I'm not bothered by it. As long as it's here and there, I suppose. This is 2019. And yes, I support not what she said. I support her right to say it. Because if I lived in Marysville, now I would know one thing for certain. I might not know who I'm voting for, but I certainly know who I'm not voting for. Jean Cramer. Yeah. In case you live in Marysville, Michigan, and you're listening to this podcast, Jean Cramer. She's an idiot and a racist. Holy cow. If you ever wondered whether or not vegans were nuts, according to Bleakley nihilistic dumbass ideology, a human life is worth no more than an animal's, and possibly less. As we see in this video, or in this soundbite, as somebody goes to a group of vegans who are holding a protest or a rally or something, and ask a simple question.
Let's do it. So imagine your dog was drowning, and then there was also a stranger. He was drowning, and you never met him before.
Right.
And you could only save one.
I would save the dog.
You'd save the dog?
Yes, I would save the dog.
That was quick. Very quick. Who do you save?
I'm gonna choose my dog.
I would scream for help and dive in, and, someone else is gonna dive in with me because I'm gonna, scream for help.
If it was just you.
Just me? I don't think that I would ever be in a position like that. More like if I were to ask you, if we live in a first country where veganism is everywhere, veganism is spreading everywhere, then why would we still contribute to violence? Yeah.
Who would you save?
In that completely hypothetical situation, Of course it would be the human being. Yeah, of course.
That's fair. Most people don't say that.
If it did ever come down to it, like choosing between a human life and an animal life, I'd have to go with the human one. And for me, it's because I know that human can save more animals.
What if it was your dog or Donald Trump?
My dog.
Oh, my dog. My dog.
I sound horrible to say this, but I would save the animals.
It would be my dog. Even if it was like just Donald Trump, I would probably just, sorry, dude.
Do girls find this attractive? Do women want to court me? I am the alpha bull.
Are you getting ready to talk on the stage?
Huh?
Are you talking? Oh,
I should be. Do you feel like, in a way, though, humans are superior to some of these species, like a cockroach, per se?
Far from it. Far from it.
I would say that cockroaches don't have a soul.
I love all animals. I don't discriminate any animals. They're all the same. Sea lion.
Like cockroaches. Like cockroaches as much as puppies?
Alone. I just leave them alone.
You don't kill cockroaches?
No. I work at a non-vegan restaurant, and if they see that there's a roach on the floor, I'm like, leave the roach alone.
Veganism.
I work in a vegan restaurant, and if I see a cockroach on the floor, I just leave it alone. And there you have it. The idiocracy of the day. Hang on, I'll be right back. I could probably ask the completely inappropriate question. So, women, when you look at a man, what part of the anatomy do you particularly find attractive? And men, when you look at a woman, which part of the female anatomy do you find particularly attractive? I mean, some people are, they like anything. They like one part of the body more so than another part of the body. I wasn't aware of this particular trend because I guess I'm just culturally illiterate. But I think our culture has now reached apotheosis, at least in Midtown Loft in New York City last week, where they had an event called ButtCon. Yes. The New York Post tells us that ButtCon was branded as a holy experience for the behind it, which included a Belfie station made in the image of Sir Mix-a-Lot's Baby Got Back music video set. Let me repeat that. A holy experience for the behind it, which included a Belfie station. Now, I had to look it up. A Belfie is a selfie, which is taken to a tasteless new extreme of malignant narcissism, described by the Urban Dictionary as a photographic self-portrait featuring the buttocks, usually posted by female celebrities on social media networks. Of course, I immediately went to social media networks and started looking for Belfies and, was sorely disappointed. ButtCon festivities included twerking classes by a drag queen duo. So at least ButtCon was a more appropriate venue than Story Hour at the local library for, toddlers. Now, the Story Hour part, the ButtCon venue, butts are the new faces, says Dr. Rita Linker, a dermatologist that specializes in glute skin. People are face-tuning their backside. Face-tuning your backside. Now, participants were invited to the ass-kissing booth featuring a woman dressed as a giant buttock. Participants milled around in T-shirts that read, "Ask me about my certain hole." Unsurprisingly, the Huffington Post loved it. I don't think that the counterculture today is the counterculture that I kind of knew of when I was growing up. ButtCon, HuffPost Queer posted this, in case you weren't aware that HuffPost has a HuffPost Queer segment or section. ButtCon, it says, is a thing, and it's here to celebrate our greatest asset. How cute. The event brought together, I can't believe this story. The event brought together experts in all things butt, from sex workers to physicians and even a butt washing specialist. American culture, let's just face it, American culture is, it's getting way, way behind. Can I put it that way? American culture is getting very far behind. And after understanding that there was something in New York City called the ButtCon, I think it's time that we celebrate an anniversary worth noting.
We've had 30 years of Prozac. So why are we still depressed? I have this almost physical memory of the first time I opened the bottle and shook this tiny green and cream-colored capsule out into my hand. I remember being scared because at the time I thought it was going to make me somebody else. And what did you think?
I vividly remember, the first time I took it, but I remember better the third and fourth time I took it because I was stunned. I was absolutely stunned. At first, I thought this couldn't be. I'm just having a good moment. But that moment turned into a day, and that day turned into a week, and that week turned into a month. And I'm someone who lived with psychiatric symptoms since I was 10 years old and probably even before. All of a sudden, I was better. And I had to reckon with what it meant that this pill was making me into a new person. I came to believe it was what I called a psychotropic Drano. It cleared my mind of all of the gunk of obsessions and the gunk of depression. And underneath was the person that I was. The most miraculous thing that's ever happened to me, and I've had 2 babies, and that's supposedly miraculous. And it was miraculous, but it wasn't as miraculous as being cured in a matter of days by a pill.
What's been the long-term effect on you?
Prozac stopped working for me. It wasn't like it's kind of dwindled down. It just stopped. So I had to switch to Effexor. I'm permanently on an SSRI or SSNRI booster. I can't get off. I've tried to get off, and it's not possible for me to do. I don't see that I'll ever be able to get off of it. In the meantime, no one really knows what the long-term side effects of the SSRIs are. I've been taking them, you've been taking them for 30 years. We're walking experiments, but the scarier thing than that is that no one's experimenting on us. They should be looking towards us. Our bodies carry the signatures of these drugs, but no one's asking us or looking at us or looking in us to find out what might be the long-term effects. Why are they so hard to get off of? And what happens to the brain if you do get off of them, and what happens to the brain if you don't get off of them? I mean, something is happening to the brain. And after 30 years of marinating your brain in a serotonin booster, clearly the brain has changed, but no one knows how or why.
No one knows how or why. And I'm not here to denigrate or to criticize anybody who's been using Prozac or any of the serotonin thingamajiggies, whatever they are, SSRIs. That's fine. But I think this NPR story actually does raise a good point. What's the effect? 30 years, as she says, of her brain marinating in this stuff, whether it's Prozac or Effexor, she can't get off of it. There's no way to get off of it without going back crap crazy. What's the effect? Nobody knows.
We've had 30 years of Prozac. So why are we still depressed?
Indeed. Why are we? This next story drives me nuts because, as I have told you 1,000 times, in fact, I still have the legal opinion over here in my file somewhere, you do not have to have identification to fly. Now, you may have to have an ID to buy an airplane ticket because the airline, a private organization, a private company, wants to know who they're selling tickets to. And they don't want me, for example, to be able to buy a ticket, and then if I can't travel on that ticket, to hand my ticket to somebody else or to sell my ticket to somebody else. It's all about controlling their capacity. It's all about controlling and protecting their revenue. So the airlines require that I provide an ID when I check in because they want to make sure that I'm the individuals they sold the ticket to. But setting that aside, I do not have to show an ID to get on an airplane. I have a right to travel. So when you walk up to that little TSA goober and they ask for your ID, if you say, I don't have an ID, now they're going to start cross-examining you immediately. Well, what do you mean you don't have an ID? Don't you have a driver's license? Don't you have a passport? No, I don't have any of those things. Well, I can't let you on the airplane. I mean, I can't let you, actually they can't say that. What they can say is, well, I can't let you go beyond the security screening. Oh, but you can. I don't have to have an ID to go through security. Well, you might be a terrorist. you might be on a watch list. Well, nobody's told me I'm on a watch list, so how can I be on a list that says I can't fly if I've never been given any sort of Fourth Amendment or Fifth Amendment due process that would tell me that I can't get on an airplane? And by the way, just being on a watch list is not going to prevent you from being able to fly. This whole kind of stuff just drives me absolutely nuts. So what's going to happen when you walk up to TSA and they say, well, where's your ID? Well, eventually they're going to cave. Now, but here's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to be willing to subject yourself to an enhanced search. I was going to say enhanced interrogation, but, well, that's what we do to terrorists. But then again, because you don't have an ID, because you don't have the appropriate driver's license, think about that. They're saying that they're protecting the American public from Al-Qaeda or some other terrorist organization because you have a driver's license. Here's how NBC... let me finish before I go to NBC. So what's going to happen is they're going to rummage through your carry-on bags. They're going to take you back into a room. They're going to give you probably a rectal examination. They're going to make you open your mouth and swab your mouth. They're going to dig around. They're going to ask you questions. They're going to detain you till you're probably going to be late for your flight anyway. But on principle, you don't have to have an ID to fly. And I get sick and tired of the government lying about you have to have an ID. I get sick and tired of the media lying about it.
With the summer travel season almost over, the TSA began warning travelers at airports today they may not be able to fly without a driver's license that complies with the new RealID law next year. Here's Tom Costello.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have both sides available. Please step down. It's the daily crush. 2.5 million passengers surging through airport security checkpoints. Starting today, TSA officers now offering a friendly warning.
Next year, make sure you have the star on your ID because you have to be in compliance with the RealID Act.
Oh, you have to have the star. Is this like the Star of David that the Nazis made the Jews wear? Is that what it is? You have to have the star on your ID. My God, we are so foolish. I know many of you right now are thinking to yourselves, well, wait a minute, Michael. I want to make sure there's not a terrorist on my airplane. Oh, so that tells me that you don't actually trust the security that you go through, because I thought that security was about preventing terrorists from getting bombs onto the airplane. So what do you care if the goober sitting next to you, who just might happen to be a dumb white guy, but is, in his other life, a terrorist? It's one or the other.
Be accepting next year, okay?
As of October 1st, 2020, you won't be able to fly if your driver's license doesn't have a RealID star in the top corner. With a clock...
There's that star again. I love it. We are just... And I've always hated the name Homeland because that just has certain Germanic connotations. The homeland. So now Homeland Security is going to require that you have a star by your name.
State DMV offices are bustling.
I know it's kind of hot outside, but be patient with us. It's cool inside, believe me.
In Virginia, they've even deployed mobile DMVs to handle the load. Everybody required to prove their identity with 4 forms of ID.
I brought my passport, so I have a valid passport.
Think about that. You bring your passport to get a stupid driver's license. Really? Why don't we just adopt internal passports? Why don't we just say that the national ID, everybody must get a passport. Doesn't make any difference whether you're ever going to fly to Vienna, whether you're ever going to fly to Rio, whether you're ever going to fly to Beijing. Every American citizen must get a passport. Because then we could actually implement the logical progression of where we're going. Internal passport control. Oh, Mr. Brown wants to drive from Colorado to New Mexico. So I'll stop at the Colorado-New Mexico border, and it'll be just like if you've ever driven in Europe. You'll pull up and you'll show your passport, and They'll ask you where you're going and what your business is. Well, I'm going to my undisclosed location. Well, what are you going to do down there? Well, it's none of your freaking business. And now we're going to detain you and see where this goes.
Brought my Social Security card.
And 2 more, like a current driver's license, a utility bill, payroll stub, birth certificate, or military ID.
I like that. So you have to bring a driver's license in order to get your driver's license. Yes, Kafkaesque, isn't it?
If you've changed your last name, you'll need proof, a marriage or divorce certificate. It's not just flying. You're also going to need a RealID to enter a military base or even a government building.
Oh, see? That's that little, we just opened the door a little bit. Yes, you're a United States citizen. You just want to go in to watch the court proceedings. You're a court junkie. You want to walk into the federal district court and you want to just, see our judicial system at work. Oh, you can't do that. No, you must have a driver's license with the Star of David on it. Except this is the Star of Homeland Security.
Wait till the last minute, and absolutely, when you come in, be prepared.
Passed after 9/11, the RealID law creates a single national standard for all 50 states.
So then we can create a single national standard database.
It doesn't matter when your license expired. By October 2020, it has to be RealID compliant or you will not be permitted to fly.
Oh, really? Maybe I'll be the one to test that. Thanks for listening to this episode of Michael Brown Unplugged. You know the drill. If you get us on iTunes, it would be great if you give me a 5-star rating. Write a nice review if you have time. Anywhere else that you download, iHeart, wherever it might be sure and share it. And you know the deal about social media. I won't make a big deal of it. Go to michaelbrowntoday.com, michaelbrowntoday.com, and follow me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. What am I leaving out? They're all right there at michaelbrowntoday.com. Thanks for listening. Talk to you on Tuesday.